Welcome back to Occasionally Philosophical, a father-son podcast where my son and I try to find a way to make some sense of this early 21st century. My name is Doug Cipolla.
And I'm Mark Cipolla.
So last week when we recorded our first episode, it took me like 3 hours to get home. And during the time that I was driving, I got to thinking, because normally our conversations are very free-flowing, right? And there was something oddly disturbing. And I didn't, normally when I see you, whenever you come down here, I go up to see you, it's always good, you know? I always feel, oh, that was nice to see Mark. And then I felt like oddly unsettled on the way home. And then it hit me. I'm not sure exactly when it hit me, but it was before I actually arrived here. And I was thinking about that book, Understanding Media by Marshall McLuhan, where he talks about the medium is the message.
Yeah.
And it hit me that the flow, the normal flow of the way that we talk to each other was really constrained by having a camera and these microphones in front of our face. Where suddenly we're it's not the normal way, because we tend to be more nonlinear, I think. Would you agree?
Definitely. Yeah. No,
we're a lot more nonlinear in our conversations. And so I was like, wow, how do I, and then I started trying to think of, well, how do we incorporate that? Keep the nonlinearity, the free-flowing nature of the way, when we sit down to talk to each other, while at the same time, like trying to be focused on a particular topic to kind of bring a point of view and make it clear, right? And so that was the one thing, like the medium is the message was one. And then do you remember a few years ago when I read that book, Against the Machine? If you don't remember, that's fine.
Vaguely.
Vaguely? Well, that was in the book, the author's name is Lee Siegel. I have it in the other room. The phrase that he used in the book was this online community, like this push where everybody's doing more and more things online is, it's a book that I haven't read. I was familiar with it, but there's only so much time that a person has. But he based a lot of his analysis on the book Future Shock. But the phrase that he used was that in order to be like successful in this new age, you have to be more like anyone else than anyone else. And that sticks with me because so much of the content, I don't know how you feel about it, but so much of the content that I see online now, it looks the same. I mean, it might have different content, but the format is repetitive. And that's what I think that Lee Siegel was getting at, to be more like anyone else than anyone else. And I was concerned, and why I'm bringing it up now, is I don't want us to fall into that trap of copying what other people do. And because I think it really screws up the rhythm of our conversations. Yeah. But anyway, that's all I wanted to say. So we left off last week. We were doing the fanboy version of Ishmael.
Right.
And do you know what I mean by that? Before we, to clarify it for the people that are listening or might be listening.
Well, yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, that channel that you put me onto, what was it called? Unsolicited Advice.
Oh yeah, that young, the young British guy.
His most recent video is about fanatics.
Right, the one he did on Eric Fromm, The True Believer. That was the book he was talking about.
Yeah, but anyways, like they were just talking about fanaticism or fanboy stuff, where basically, you're coming at it from, well, we just believe it. We read it, or I read it, we read it, and it just made sense to me. And so now we're kind of talking about it from this positive, like, we really like it, we think other people should listen to it.
Yeah.
Or read it, I should say, rather. Well, or audiobook it, either way. Listen.
However you get around to it, yeah.
Yeah, but but yeah, so I guess right now, the last episode, and I guess even this one, we're going to be more coming at it from, hey, we really like the book and we want to share it with people because of our overall worldview conversation. It's a good starting point for that. But after we kind of, like we discussed on last episode, we are going to talk about, examples of mother culture today. But like you wanted to do, or you suggested that next time we should come at it from a more critical view. Because I mean, I've seen it online where people are like, this book is garbage, it's sophomoric, it's whatever.
Right.
Or
And the idea is that if you come at it from a purely like technical, philosophical point of view, there are criticisms that you can make. And the idea is, well, are those criticisms fatal to my project? Right? Because I'm not saying that Quinn got everything right, but he presented like a framework by which a lot of these other things that, again, I'm trying to rebuild my worldview after the disaster last year. As far as what you're doing, I think you're just trying to maybe clarify your own.
Yeah.
But I think that this is a good like organizing way, to sort of like start to make sense of a lot of the conflicts that are tearing people apart right now. I don't really have a framework yet. I've been like playing with different ways of putting all these different pieces together that are laying on the ground in front of me, and this is one of them. So we left off last week kind of talking about, we introduced the concept of mother culture.
Right.
And I, if I remember correctly, I had used one example that I thought was relevant because of the impact that movie, The Matrix, had.
Yeah.
And the fact that there were a couple of like bits of dialogue in the movie that seemed to me to be pretty much proof that this voice is all around us. And I kind of forget where we left off because because it didn't follow our normal flow. It was a little hard for me to wrap up. So where do you want to pick up now?
Yeah. So I guess let's just wait. Sorry. So yeah, let's get into it. Into examples of mother culture.
All right. Well, I gave you one last week. You got one for me?
Yeah. Well, when you say, let me just start with the kind of the first one that I think we talked about last week.
All
and
right.
then we can kind of expand from there. But the idea that mother culture tells us that the world was made for us.
All right.
Right. And I pulled a quote from the book. Basically, this is pretty straightforward quote. But according to your mythology, the world was made for man.
All right. This is from Ishmael.
This is from that.
So this is Ishmael talking to the narrator.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. So, and we kind of touched on it even with, we touched on the Adam and Eve story last time. And that whole story is kind of like, I mean, before the fall part was like, the world was made for you. God made the heavens, the earth, and he made Adam and Eve, and boom, here's your
paradise.
Yeah,
enjoy.
And then they ruined it, which is why it's not paradise anymore. But the idea that God made the world for us specifically, not the millions of other life forms, which is another. I didn't write this quote down, but it is another funny. I found it funny from Ishmael when he says, "This may be news to you, but you are only one among millions of species that inhabit this planet."
Yeah. Yeah, I do remember that one. This may come as a shock to you. Well, it's sort of like when you're talking to someone who's so full of themselves, right? And then it's like, this may come as a shock to you, but the world doesn't revolve around you.
Right, exactly. Which is funny because we do literally think maybe not me individually, but as a collective, humans think the world revolves around us. you know. And like we said last week, we wanted to talk about real world examples. So this is something that's actually it, like just tearing down stuff to build stuff. You know, like we used to complain about this in California a lot, you know, as far as just not that there's a ton of trees, at least where we lived at when I was growing up in Southern California, there's not a ton of trees, but even the little bit of trees that they do have, they either cut them down to make way for a new shopping plaza or a new housing development. And then, you know, so it's that type of attitude of just,
Well, the other thing that they did in California that I used to complain about because they don't do it here was the way they would prune the trees back to where it was just like the trunk and the branches with no leaves.
yeah, you know, because once again, it's unsightly.
Well, yeah, all those leaves on the ground. We need to hire city workers to take care of the leaves, and that's budget problems.
Right.
I don't think that's the reason, but you can make up any kind of crazy story because there are those excuses. But that was a complaint that I had in California. Like, okay, now you have a tree, but it's not even providing any shade.
Right. Yeah. It's a pointless example. But yeah, it's like we do it constantly. I mean, I don't know, just right across the street here, they built that new townhome development, which used to just be a bunch of trees.
Yeah, there were woods across the street. Now there's new townhomes over there. What do they call that? Middletown Walk. That was an entire. What was like a compost? What do they mulch?
Oh yeah.
Farm and that over there, but that was all woods. And now there's a couple of thousand, well, at least a few hundred new townhomes.
Yeah.
You know, built in over there too. So. Well, yeah, that constant destruction of the natural environment in order to make room for us.
Right.
Right. But I think that's a consequence. I mean, that's what the civilization is doing. However, like the voice of mother culture, like the examples, right? Like I gave The Matrix, right? It's like it's embedded. It's right there in a movie that's supposedly countercultural, make you question the system. But yet baked right into it is we're in control of our own fate. And our presence on the planet is a mistake.
Yeah.
Well, that doesn't seem like a very uplifting kind of thing, and that's what we're up against. Or at least that's what it seems like. That's what I feel like I'm trying to understand. You know, like why if I read a book like The Heat Will Kill You First and about wet bulb temperature, and then I can watch documentaries online that talk about this increasing heat and the dangers, and yet we're still going crazy, you know, burning fossil fuels. We're not even slowing down.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm trying to understand why. And if it's the voice of mother culture, like we're taking that's what it is. It's this voice. What other examples were you able to find? And if you couldn't find any, that's okay. You know, were you able to come up with something either from a TV show or a book that you read or something where those assumptions are just baked in?
That the world belongs to, like a more specific example than like deforestation.
Well, just in other words, like the world belongs to us is like the axiom, right? But it's not going to show up said like that. It's going to show up altered in some way, but the message is going to be there all the same.
Yeah. Well, I was talking about this last night. The like chicken, like the way we essentially harvest chickens as if they were some kind, you know, as if they're like this commodity just for us to eat. Like it's like, yes, I get it. The circle of life. We eat animals. Animals eat animals. There's this whole thing, but we breed thousands and thousands of chickens, millions of chickens in these terrible conditions, you know, just because that underlying thing is the world belongs to us and these animals are just here to serve us. So
Right.
we
Those are actions. So what is the message in the culture that's causing us to continue to that's what do they call that? Factory farming, right? Where the chickens are in these little cages where they can't even turn around, you know, and they live their entire lives like that. That's a consequence. That's a function of the story. So what story are they listening to? Like when they turn on the TV, what do they hear that makes them not want to do anything about that? Or they don't even know that it exists. Well, do you watch a lot of TV?
No.
All right. So then you're not going to be able to pull from those examples. What when you're not working or being with your fiance and, you know, just having life, when you're just sitting around thinking or you're looking for a diversion, what do you do for a diversion? Is it YouTube? Is it podcasts? Is it?
It's mostly, I mean, I probably spend more time watching YouTube videos than anything.
All right. So in those YouTube videos that you watch, the thesis that Quinn's advancing is that even in that content, this message is coming through. So can you give me maybe you don't have one right off the top of your head. That's fine. But, you know, like make a little jot a note down so that when the next time that you're watching a YouTube video, one of those diversionary things that we'll do, I do it too. You know, I need a break too. Right. And so can you see it? Like, and try to pull it out. And then you can say, well, Dad, I think this might be an example. And then we can look at it together and say, is it or is it not? Because if the thesis is true, if Quinn's thesis is true, then we should be able to find versions of that story. And it's not all going to be in every video. It might be this aspect of the story pops up over here. And that aspect of it. So there might be one YouTube video that nails the world was made for man aspect of it. There may be another YouTube video that focuses on the humans are inherently sinful and we don't know what the hell we're doing, and that's why the world is so screwed up.
Can you give me an example of what you're trying to talk to, like what you're trying to ask me of? Because I feel like I've given you examples, but like those.
Well, no. Like what I'm saying is that like factory farming is a consequence of people listening to a message. Right. It's a consequence, but you're never going to turn on The Walking Dead or Buffy the Vampire Slayer or anything and hear the world was made for man. You're going to hear it. You're going to hear that message in some other way.
Do you mean like or maybe the fact that we don't think that like well, not me, but people don't think that animals have consciousness, something like that? Do you mean like the like it's fine that we do all this to the chickens because it doesn't matter, like because we're the superior being in their consciousness?
I can see where we're not on the same wavelength right now. We're talking about the same thing, but we're coming at it from slightly different angles.
Yeah.
In other words, my example from The Matrix was, you know, here's this question. Morpheus meets Neo. And he asks him, do you believe in fate? Right? And Neo's response is, no. Why not? Because I don't like to think that I'm not in control of my own life. Now, that not in control of my own life is a variation on the tree of knowledge story that we talked about last week. We're in control, right? So it's not exactly, but it's a variation of, right? And then the consequences of that are all around us. You know, environmental degradation, war, pollution, people screaming at each other, mass shootings, you want to name it, what's going on in the world, right? So you're right. You're absolutely right that factory farming and continued dumping and all of that is a consequence of the story. But it's the delivery system of the story, right? So if I wanted to know if I was looking for an example of man's sinful nature, that the reason that we can't solve our problems is because we're sinful. That's the problem. All right. How does that message show up in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air? How does that show up in The Simpsons? How does that show up in The Walking Dead? How does that show up in Game of Thrones? How does that show up in the New York Times, the New York Post, the Los Angeles Times, the LA Weekly, Chicago Tribune? That's kind of where I'm going from. Not the consequences, but the delivery system of these messages so that some other listener begins to pick up on it.
Yeah.
Right. And the reason I think that you're struggling with it is because it's really effing hard to hear.
Yeah. Well,
The Hunger Games. All right, there's a book right there. How is the voice of mother culture manifested in a book like The Hunger Games?
besides the fact that it's sitting here, but also the fact that it's very, to me, it's much more obvious. And I'm not sure if they really touched on it in this one, but in the Snakes and Songbirds, or Songbirds and Snakes, whatever, I forget.
Well, one of the books in the series that I've read.
Well, I just don't remember which one's first. Is it Songbirds? But anyway, the point being is the one that talks about Coriolanus Snow, that there's this part where he's talking to Dr. Gall, who was like one of the game makers, right? But she talks about that, the inherent flaw of man, that like if you just leave men, like this whole Hunger Games thing was like, look, if you just leave them up to their own devices, they're just going to kill each other and they're going to do the worst possible things, because that's just how we are inside. Which, I mean, my argument against that is you're literally putting 24 children and you're forcing them to fight. It's not like they wouldn't just fight naturally. They're fighting because...
Well, it's a contrived situation in the book.
Right, but the point is
but that's exactly the kind of thing that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Right? So when you're out in the world and you're on TikTok and you're on YouTube or whatever, are you able to pick up on those like the axioms that we talked about last week, the 5 main axioms of mother culture? Do you start to, can you start to hear them? And it takes that kind of effort.
Well, yeah, and I guess this is part of not so much the world was made for us, but the whole locking up the food aspect of it.
Yeah.
We talked about this briefly before we started recording, but this whole thing with there's like this idea that like government handouts are bad, right? Because these people are lazy and they should be working for their food and their shelter. And it's kind of that whole, you don't work, you don't eat.
Yeah, well, now we go back to the Cain and Abel story, right? Because when Cain murdered Abel and was kicked out of the garden, what was his punishment? From the sweat of your brow, you will work and toil, and and you'll struggle to extract life from the earth instead of the beneficence of God of giving you everything.
Yeah,
right. And so if that's part of the story, right?
Yeah.
Now you have, and we were talking in response to people that were saying that the bill that just got passed here in the United States, that's going to strip people of their health care and kids from their nutritional assistance and all that kind of stuff. And that was the part that you brought up about the government handouts are bad, right? Yeah. And that's based in this idea that we, man, need to work. We need to earn our right to live, right, instead of it being a gift.
Yeah. Right. And it's like you hear people are championing the idea that, yeah, no, they should have to work.
Yeah, they should have to work at least 80 hours a week, 80 hours a month to qualify for Medicaid. What about all those 18 million, underprivileged kids that just had their school lunch programs cut?
Right.
Are they going to go get a job? Is that where we're heading now?
I'm sure they would want that.
Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves. But part of what this exploration, I hope to at some point be able to understand that, to be able to construct a worldview that enables me to understand that mindset and possibly build a bridge to bring them over to a more uplifting kind of thing. Because one of my beliefs is that it's better to help someone than it is to take advantage of them. Just in general, And I seem to live in a world where the opposite is true. Like when someone sees that you don't know something, oh, great, now I can screw you over because you don't understand this. Right. And we live in an increasingly more complex world where the things that are feeding into each other are almost beyond the average person's ability to really understand all the factors that play into half the stuff that we have to do on a daily basis.
Right.
Now, maybe it's just a lack of intellectual horsepower on my part. I don't deny that possibility, although I don't think it's because I'm functionally stupid. I just think that sometimes the way that situations are presented to us is incorrect and all that kind of stuff, which is why like this worldview thing is so important to me, like building it up from the ground. Okay, Ishmael lays it out that says, all right, there's this story that we're enacting as a civilization. It means we're all participating. We've all accepted our role in the play.
Yeah.
We haven't questioned the role. We're just doing it. Right. And that's where I want to start. And I veered off again. So that's one of those nonlinear things that we do. You want to try to bring me back on track, or you want to stay on this line for a while?
Yeah,
Yeah, I hate it when I do that to you, Mark. Sorry about that.
I had something to say and then you just
shot it out of your head.
Dumped it. You just.
I did a Ben Shapiro on you. Sorry.
Kind of. Yeah. Yeah, because I had something that I wanted to add to that. Whatever, it doesn't matter.
Well, it does. It's one of those things that your grandmother used to say was, if it's important, it'll come back to you.
Yeah. I guess we kind of already touched on the humans are flawed and must be controlled.
Oh, must be controlled.
Yeah.
We didn't really touch on that much. What are the mechanisms of control? What are some of the mechanisms of control that maybe you fight against?
Well, I mean, obviously the biggest one that's obvious, obviously I said obvious like 3 times right now. But government, obviously that's one big one, because we elect, or at least in this country, we elect them to control us basically.
Yeah, we choose our jailers.
Yeah. But there's also religion is also another way,
a form of control.
I would argue capitalism itself is a form of control, because you have, let's just put it this way. I don't want to wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning every day, take a shower, drive to work, to a job that I really don't like, but it pays me fairly well. I don't really want to do that, but I have to because of this story that we're enacting.
Right. So
I'm controlled in that sense.
Well, you're controlled in a lot
In a
more.
lot
I mean,
of
that's the big system of control. But then derived from that, there are all these other forms of control, like religion and what was the other thing you mentioned? Government, right? And then you get into the more subtle aspects of how advertising and oh Jesus, you know, in my research for this project that I'm working on, my worldview rebuilding project, I've been coming across all kinds of things that are relevant in various ways, like the attention economy.
Yeah.
And all of the factors that are being talked about as far as how the attention economy is screwing people up. Then you've got this concept of, I just came across it like a couple of weeks ago, surveillance capitalism.
Yeah.
I'm not even prepared to talk about that yet. I'm still like learning the landscape of what that is all about. But that's also a means of control, because the more that you or I or anybody interact with all this stuff online, the more information they have about us, which makes it much more easy for them to target us with ads that bypass all our defenses that we respond to.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a form of control.
Yeah, surveillance in the form, like of but even like, I don't know, at my job, there's probably 15 cameras at my job that watch probably almost everything I do.
Oh yeah, we're constantly in cameras, and you know, like I'm trying to find a way to get away from driving for Uber, as you know, because of the frustrations that gig has for me.
Right.
But as speaking of surveillance and control, there's this app that Uber has that basically monitors the way that I drive anytime I have my phone on me.
Oh wow.
Right, and I get a score.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, you know, and about every week I get a new score from 1 to 100.
Yeah.
And I laugh because it's like, oh, well, you're only driving better than 29% of the drivers in New Jersey. And I'm like, and then I at the bottom, it says, well, why my score is low. And it says hard braking is one of the reasons.
Yeah.
And as an experiment, one week I was letting the cruise, like the automatic thing in the Subaru, the cruise control, like stop me and all that. And it actually stops me shorter than I do.
Right.
It doesn't brake as soon as I start braking. So I'm like, if this app thinks that I drive like crap, I can't imagine what it's going to think or what score it would give these, like this assisted driving that my Subaru has versus these robo taxis that are still coming.
Yeah. Well, it does remind me.
But it's another form of control, right? Because I get a score, I get this email in the Uber app that says, oh, your score is 81. And I'm like, okay. Then it affects the way that I drive.
Right. Yeah.
Subtly. I mean, I don't notice it right away, but it does.
Yeah. Just to piggyback off that, a few years ago when, progressive, this is not it's not an advertisement, but I happen to use them, whatever. But anyways, a few years ago, they sent me this, little box that hooks up to the OBD thing under the dashboard in the car, because it's like, oh, well, if you're a safe driver,
oh, you get a discount.
You get a discount. So I'm like, whatever, like just like anybody, we're all trying to save a little money here and there. So I signed up for it. I got the thing. And the thing about that was that it physically beeps when you do something.
Really?
Like it beeps in the car.
So like if you were to stop short, for example, it would beep?
Correct.
Or if you made a sharp turn?
It would beep. Or if I accelerated too fast, it would beep.
No kidding.
Now,
what car were you driving when you had that?
My WRX of all cars.
So you probably heard that beep a lot then.
Well, see, but back to the control, the surveillance aspect of it is because it was beeping at me, it made me conscious of it. But here's the part where I this is why I brought this up, because you mentioned the hard braking. And for people who don't live in Jersey, there are streets in Jersey where the speed limit is 50 miles an hour and there's stoplights. That thing beeped all the time because of that. Because I'm going 50 miles an hour or 55 if I'm being honest, and the light turns yellow. So it's like I have to stop.
Right. That's
And it would qualify that as hard braking. But it's like that's not hard braking because
you're not paying attention.
I'm not paying attention or I'm tailgating somebody. It's hard braking because it's a fast speed limit and a red light. And, I mean, could I have maybe not? Because obviously the yellow is longer because the speed limit is 55 or 50. But it's still like, I'd rather stop and be safe than get a
if you live in New Jersey, you know the fact that our yellow lights are not all the same length.
Well, that too.
Some of them are 1 second long, some of them are 3 seconds long. So you're driving along and you stop at a yellow light and you realize, oh, that's a long one. I could have made that one. And then so the next one you're coming up on, it turns yellow in front of you and you think, oh, well, it's like the last one. Not this one.
Yeah. So, I mean, surveillance and
life in the big city.
Yeah, and just, but all of these things and we're actually, now that they've become so ubiquitous, I think.
Yeah, that's the word.
It kind of like, I guess, subconsciously controls your behavior to a certain
And that's exactly the point. Right. So that's the relevance of the mother culture again, bringing it back around to where we started.
Yeah.
Right. Because the voice of mother culture is exerting that same kind of influence on the way that individuals respond to various challenges, whatever it is. Right. I think are we on the same page again? You gave me that look like you weren't sure what I was saying.
Can you say that again, what you just said?
In other words, to tie it back around, right? The voice of mother culture is influencing the way that we approach problems.
Right.
Right. And that seems to me to be relevant to this thing that you're talking about, these subtle forms of control. Like the thing that you got from the insurance company that you put in your car to get a better rate, and then it's beeping at you. And so just the fact that it's beeping at you altered the way that you behaved.
Right.
Right. And so that was obvious. So it's the same alteration of your behavior, but this is operating on the subconscious level, the voice of mother culture, which is why it's so hard to hear.
Yeah.
Right. And why, once you become at least attuned to the possible existence of it, at least you know what to look for or to listen for. Right. Especially when you're having a conversation with your fiance and you disagree on something, or you're having a conversation with a work colleague and there's a disagreement about something. Right. And when you're trying to resolve it, all of a sudden it's like, we're not getting anywhere. Well, what's the cause of that we're not getting anywhere is what I'm trying to get at. And part of it, I think, is because of these messages and because they're so frequent, we can't not hear them. And if we're never unplugging, right? If we have the TV on all the time, or if the TV's not on, we have a podcast on in our headphones. And if we're not listening to a podcast, we're, scrolling through TikTok to make sure that we keep up with all the people that we follow, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If we never unplug, how do you even, where do you get the space to sort through to say, well, what the hell did I just listen to all day?
Yeah.
And have you ever found yourself upset and you don't know why?
Yeah.
What do you think? Do you think that this might have something to do with that?
What do you mean?
That you're inhaling a message
All day.
that's telling you that there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
But it's not telling you directly that there's something wrong with you. It's that unconscious repetition of the world's messed up and there's nothing you can do about it. The world's messed up and there's nothing you can do about it. You're messed up. Your hair's not long enough. It's the wrong color. Your eyes are bloodshot. You're too fat. You're not in enough shape. Your biceps. How come you don't have a tattoo? And all of a sudden, somebody says something to you and you snap at them.
Well, yeah.
Because for the last 3 hours, you've been just absorbing these messages.
Yeah.
That's, at least for me, one of the reasons why I threw the book at you in the first place, and all of that was to at least bring it up to, like, when you're looking at things, it's like, well, always look at the world and then look at yourself. Why am I upset? Like my fiance said something to me. All right, it was a little annoying, but wow, I'm overreacting. But we don't ask ourselves that question because, we never take the time to step back and try to figure out, well, what is it that I've been listening to for the last 6 hours? Or what have I been listening to my entire life?
Yeah. And it's also like because you're listening to it all the time, it's like when, the humans are inherently flawed, like, I think that goes along. You just kind of reminded me, like the negative self-talk, like just, because I've been trying to not talk to myself so negatively lately, but ultimately I think that the fact that we all do it, or most of us do it to a point where this is something that's like in the self-help realm, is something that they talk about, is not talking. It's like if I make a mistake, there's a lot of, oh, I'm a fuck up, or excuse me, whatever. I'm not sure if we've decided to curse on this podcast, but
you can beep it out on your editing.
Yeah, but anyways, like I'm a screw up.
That's what you actually say to yourself?
Yes, not anymore, but I have in the past. But it's that mother culture that I'm inherently flawed and there's something wrong with me.
Yeah. So in the self-help literature, they have this thing called they call it the inner critic. That's that voice in our head that says, "Oh, yeah," like you said, "I'm a screw up." Is that the way you put it? But there's all sorts of versions of that.
Yeah,
and
I can never get anything right.
Yeah. You're not smart enough to do this, on and on. Your grandmother, bless her pointed little head, she used to, over the years, she would send me these self-help books.
Yeah.
That she would read. And I think she recognized that, there was a lot of stuff that went on in that family that were damaging to all of us, my sisters and I. And I think I think it was her inability to admit that she had caused like some damage to us. But it was her way of at least saying, okay, I know that you guys have some problems. I won't admit that they're my fault, but here's a self-help book that you might use to help you. And one of the books that she sent me was this, What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. And it really is all about rewriting that script in a positive way. So what are you doing along those lines? Are you just like becoming aware of it when you do say it? Or are you actually, because in that book, he recommends like making little recordings. And when we have our phones, a voice recorder on our phone, so we could do it, of like good positive things, like whatever it is that you like the qualities about yourself that you're trying to bring more to the front. Have you tried that, or? right now it's just more recognizing that when you say something negative and going, no, 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 and then just throwing it away.
I would say probably I'm more at that part. And
The latter?
Yeah, and I also I also made a joke to my coworker the other day that, like, I said that I am no longer letting the managers gaslight me into thinking that I'm not doing my job correctly. Because it's, I mentioned last time I'm in sales, and sales are kind of down right now. And in the 12 years that I've been in this industry, every single time that sales slow down, it always becomes about what the salesmen or salespeople are not doing. You're not doing this. You're not doing that. You're not making enough phone calls. You're not sending enough emails. And I'm like, could I put in a little more effort? Yeah, we can always put in more effort.
Hustle culture.
Right. There's that, which is also part of mother culture, is like, yeah, you can give 110% or whatever. But the fact of the matter is I do make my phone calls. I do send out my emails. Sometimes business is busy. Sometimes business is slow. And it's just how it is. But like, you guys are making it seem like it's somehow my fault, or my other fellow salespeople, and it's like, I kind of forgot where I was going with this. But
well, it's the negative talk.
Oh,
in
yeah,
other
the
words,
negative talk. Like,
because the sales manager in their little team meetings are basically they're reinforcing the very kind of negative self-talk that you're trying to get rid of.
Okay, yes, thank you for reminding me where I was going with it.
It's okay, Mark.
Yeah.
It's hard to keep up with you sometimes, but that time I was following along.
Yeah, so it's like, I'm trying to not talk to myself like that, and I'm not going to let you do it, because the funny thing about sales in general is, well, one, I work for you because you provide me with customers. If I had my own customer base, I'd be sitting at home on my laptop making sales. But I work for a company because there's a certain amount of advertising capital.
Right. They are able to do the marketing that you would not be able to do on your own.
Correct. But it's like, I don't know. I guess my ultimate point with that is that, yes, I'm working on talking to myself better. And I'm also not letting the other negative things that people will say.
You're not internalizing them.
Correct.
All right. One of the things that I've been working on is that actually recording myself, telling myself the uplifting things, because and one of the, out there in the what do they call that? The wilderness of YouTube, there's a bunch of like self-improvement kind of channels. And one of the things that I heard, in fact, I might have even shared it with you, was on this self-talk thing, which I thought was really fantastic. I forget who it was now, but it was one of those self-improvement channels on YouTube. But the guy was talking to someone, and the idea was that if you have a friend that's going through a hard time, they're struggling with something, you're really supportive. Like, you'll go to them, "Oh, Mark, I know that things are tough right now, but you got this, man. You're better than this kind of crap." That's what we'll say to our friends.
Yeah.
Right. But when it comes to ourselves, we're not as like upbeat and cheerleading. So this particular conversation, the guy says, when you're talking to yourself, be that friend, be that coach, act like a coach to yourself instead of just, positive affirmations or something. And I thought, I tried it a couple of times and I went, oh, it actually does help me. I don't know if it would help you or not, but it does help me, like, when I catch myself in that, and I get caught in these loops, though. It's not just one thought. Like, one will come, and man, it might be 15 minutes later, and I'm so far down in the dumps. I'm like, what the hell? because it's the habit of decades of my life. I'm just breaking out of this now, because I didn't understand the root cause of all the issues that I had. Every time I went to a therapist, it was symptom management. And symptom management goes up to a point, but if you don't address the root cause, the problem just keeps coming, which is my entire life, which is what you had to deal with, me trying to deal with that, and the issues that it's created for you and for us at this particular point, but we're working through them. And maybe part of this podcast will be, getting to the end of that road too.
Yeah, I don't want to keep talking about work, but something you said about getting to the root cause, like, is just an issue I've been having. But I think that's a lot of times, I guess piggybacking off of that for a second, that's kind of a problem that even a lot of this self-help stuff, it's like it's a Band-Aid.
Yeah, it's a symptom management. You're having this problem in your relationships. Okay, here's what you can do. But it never gets down to why you're having the problems in the relationships. Right? Well, I stopped dating when you were like 10 years old because I realized that I was having you were talking about work.
Yeah.
Right. And the root cause analysis thing. And you said something about that.
Well, yeah, because basically, like a lot of times at work, well, back to what I said a second ago, it's like it's always blame the salespeople. Right. Blame the salespeople. If, the paperwork is wrong, it's the salesperson. If the computer doesn't match the paperwork, it's the salesperson. If, whatever. If the car's not ready, I've been trying to dance around it, but whatever, I sell cars. But if the car's not ready, it's the salesperson's fault. If the VIN number doesn't match the registration, it's the salesperson's fault. And it's like, yeah, like you can put all that stuff on me, right? But my thing is I'm not the only person that works here. So by you putting that on me and making me double check and do all this stuff, to me, that's like a Band-Aid. That's like, versus how about the person?
You look at the system and you say, okay, like there's a series of steps that should take place in this process. Right. Whether you're selling cars or whether you're selling computer systems or ERP systems or whatever. There's a process.
Yeah.
And if everybody involved in the process does what they're supposed to do when the customer shows up to pick up their car, they get it and drive away. Right. But that doesn't always happen all the time. And instead of looking at the root cause, like systemically, where are this thing? No, just blame you.
Well, yeah.
Or you work harder, you make sure you go double check all the other things that you're not supposed to do to make sure that they're done.
Right.
And that's a source of frustration. That was a source of frustration in my career too. I remember one time a boss came to me. She asked me for a report that I was supposed to do. And I was waiting on some information from someone else, from another department that I hadn't gotten yet.
Yeah.
And that was my answer when she asked where the report was.
Right.
And she looked at me and she goes, well, did you follow up with them? And I said, it's not my job to follow up with them. Well, right. I found out I was wrong about that for one thing.
Yeah.
But over time working at that company, I kept having to follow up with that person. I never got the information when I was supposed to.
Right.
Right. I always had to go chase it down.
Yeah.
So I went to this boss of mine and I told her that. And nothing changed. And that was a problem for me because now root cause analysis says this person is the cause of my problem.
Yeah.
So I went to the organizational structure that's supposed to fix it. I go to my boss to say, this other department is falling down on the job. They're not providing required information to me on a timely basis. So you, as a manager, go talk to the manager of that person, who then talks to that employee, straightens them out so that they deliver the information to me, and problem goes away.
Right.
Never happened. And so that's why like root cause analysis is huge, even in what we're talking about right now. It's like, let's get to the root cause of the problem. It might take a while.
Yeah.
And we may go down a bunch of dead ends in trying to get there, but that's my focus.
Which is kind of why, I guess, going back to last episode of why we chose Ishmael, because I think we'll get into critiques of it next time, but at a kind of a, I guess, a fundamental level, that's kind of what he's proposing in the book, is that, yes, there's bunch of hundred thousands, millions of problems with our world and how it works, but ultimately
they come from
this mother culture, these few ideas that we hold to be true and enact that.
So all of these systems that derive from those central ideas just create all these problems.
Well, it's kind of like briefly, telling my fiance I'm coming down here to do this, and and obviously we talk about the podcast and stuff, and it was like, kind of in preparation for this, she had said that capitalism is the problem, right? Is kind of the root problem.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, kind of, but capitalism is only a few hundred years old. The modern form of capitalism is only a few hundred years old. And like I was telling her, is that no, we're going back further, before capitalism, before feudalism, before whatever
came before that,
other
right?
isms, I said, I'm going, so it's like, yeah, I mean, I could make an argument for capitalism being a huge problem or a huge contributor to a lot of the problems we have. But like you said, that's still somewhat symptomatic, because ultimately capitalism stems out of these ideas that the world is made for us. We are meant to conquer the world. The earth is just a
huge resource
system for us. Like the fact, the deforestation and the mining and the oil and blah, 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 blah. It's like, yeah, is the earth, yes, the resources on the earth are partly meant for us, but not us alone. And also not the way that we use them.
Right. Well, you mentioned, like the capitalism and talking with your fiance, and another YouTube channel that I occasionally tune into. This guy is doing a Patreon, basically exploration of this guy, Frederick Jameson, who wrote on the logic of late stage capitalism.
Yeah.
Right? And I thought, well, that would be interesting, but I don't want to subscribe to the guy's Patreon,
Yeah.
Not that I don't think that he deserves it or anything like that. I mean, he's a PhD in philosophy, he's a former professor, and that. So I'm sure that it would be a worthwhile discussion to be a part of. It's just that financially right now, making a bunch of commitments to support a lot of other people is just not in my, I'm not capable of doing that right now. But I thought it would definitely be interesting to explore that. I think in his on his page, he did put a link to the paper that he's going to be exploring. So I could get the paper. I could get my hands on the paper without necessarily having to pay or have, be part of a discussion. I could read it myself to see what I can glean from it.
Right.
But again, that's a symptom. Yeah, capitalism is a symptom of this deeper underlying issue. And the thing about every time I think about criticizing capitalism, I'm like, oh God, all critics of capitalists go through Marx. And every time you mention Marx, it just freaks people out.
Yeah.
Marxist, like Lenin and, millions dead. And, I don't think that's really what he meant. But again, it's kind of the problem between encountering a good idea and then running too far with it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like the danger of even something like Ishmael. Great idea. But if you're not critical, if you don't look at the idea critically to say, well, how does it help and where does it start to crumble? If you don't find the weak spots in it, then you're in danger of running too far and thinking that you have the answer and then you've just created more problems.
Yeah.
So next week, I think we'll put on our critical glasses and see if we can poke a couple of holes. Well, I don't necessarily want to shred it, right? But to look at the weaknesses in his argument and see if possibly there are ways that it can still be used as an organizing principle, even if it's not true in some objective sense.
Yeah.
Which, again, is part of the worldview of the scientific rationality that we live in.
Yeah.
Right? And you get these weird little feedback loops. At least the way that I see things right now, I could be wrong. And I have been in the past.
Yeah. All right. So I guess we've been going.
We got about an hour worth of material here?
Yeah, we've been going for about an hour. I think we can
all right. Well, then, one more time. My name is Doug Cipolla.
And I'm Mark Cipolla.
And you've been listening to Occasionally Philosophical.
And one little thing, just because you mentioned Patreon, we don't have one yet, but we might in the future. So then you could help us on Patreon, and then we could subscribe to
your channel, and
Patreons.
Then all that money that the rich people won't let us have, we'll just circulate it around ourselves.
You're right. That's the whole idea. That's what we should be doing anyways.
Mark, that actually feels closer to the truth. That feels dangerously close to the truth.
So, yeah, thanks for joining us. And I just, like last time, I wanted to leave you with just kind of one question just to think about. What small changes could you make in your personal life that might help you reject some of these narratives of mother culture?
Oh, nice one. See you next week.
Next week.